Hi, welcome to What's the Point? I'm Bill Ellis, your host. Each week I talk with people about the moments that shaped them, the choices that changed them, and what those stories might spark in you. And with that said, let's get into today's conversation. Why is it that some people can earn well, save well, and still feel anxious every time they open their bank account? Why do some of our biggest arguments in relationships begin with money, but are almost never really about money? And why can someone have enough on paper yet feel like they are one step away from losing everything? Maybe money is not just math, maybe it's memory, maybe it's fear. Maybe it's the stories we inherit long before we ever have any money of our own. I'm Bill Ellis, and welcome to What's the Point, a place where we take time to explore what shapes us, what pulls us forward, and what we are really searching for underneath the choices we make. Today, obviously, we're going to be talking about money, and my guest is Tari Vickery. Tari is a financial wellness coach and the author of a newly released book, The Emotional Side of Money. Her work focuses on something many people quietly struggle with but rarely talk about, the emotional relationship we have with money. Before this work, her own life moved through very different seasons of security, loss, rebuilding, and reflection, which shaped the ways she now helps others think about money, fear, and financial freedom. Through her company, Life Matters Financial Group, she works with individuals and families on both the practical and emotional realities of money. Today, we're going to talk about scarcity, security, inherited beliefs, relationships, and what it really means to feel like enough is enough. And with that, Tari, hi, welcome.
Hi, Bill. What wonderful questions you raised. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and I'm looking very much forward to your input on the answers and some insights because that's what we're here about is to gain insights and hopefully an aha moment or two from you and your expertise and your experience. So before we talk about money as adults, it usually starts much earlier, right? So
Right.
when you look back, what was money like? What did money feel like in your childhood home?
Oh, it very much felt like fear.
Fear.
Um, yes. My mother was 19 when I was born, and I had a 4-year-old brother.
Mm.
So she was way too young to be taking care of little people, especially with a ninth grade education and a husband who divorced her when I was 8 months old. So she had no education, and he never paid a penny's child support my entire life. He left the state to avoid it deliberately, and she had to survive and provide for these two little people that she'd created.
That's very interesting and on the other hand a bit sad. But it leads me to wonder, uh, what were the messages you absorbed about money whether anyone said them out loud or not?
Well, I come from actually 3 generations where the women were the breadwinners and the men left. So the messages I got were ancestral, really,
Okay.
that we do not have the money, and actually the identity with our family. We are people who don't have money
Mm,
and will always struggle, but have extreme perseverance, very strong women who found a way to support their families, particularly in eras when that didn't typically happen. So there
right.
was also the whole social stigma to it. But we survived, and we are survivors first and foremost. And so that identity was very strongly entrenched. I feel like it's almost in my DNA.
That's really interesting and speaks a great deal to how we are influenced in so many different areas of our life. But when it comes to money, it's arguably as important, uh, likely as anything. It's at least tied for number one, I would say, as far as importance and surviving. So you talk about it being ancestral, which leads me to ask, do you think most people inherit a financial mindset before they even realize it?
I rather doubt that it is as specific as mine, or at least as obvious. Maybe that's the issue, is because of the nature of it for happening for so many generations. It was far more. I think I've probably felt it more deeply. Whereas people who grow up in a home that, first of all, has two parents and maybe two incomes, and, regardless of whether they have a lot of wealth or they're struggling to get by, I imagine the stories that they grow up with, certainly I know for a fact that they impact their relationship with money. But I don't know that it is as ancestral, if it feels as ancestral as it does to me. But also, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on this and, delving into it that most people haven't spent either.
That's true, and that's one of the reasons that we have you as our guest, because you've done exactly that, and you have insights. Whereas your story may not be exceptionally unique, the fact that you've reviewed it and reflected and taken the time to try to analyze where you were and how you got to where you are now is integral to understanding the whole situation and the impact and the journey. And I think a lot of people are going to be interested in some of the awareness that you've gotten through your experience and through the time of self-reflection. A lot of us don't like taking time to do that self-reflection because we're
Not only
afraid.
taking the time, but I also think we don't think about it.
Right.
Very few, there just aren't many of us, I don't think, who think about what they think about money and why that might be.
That's a good point. And to build on what I was going to say is I think a lot of us are hesitant to do a lot of self-reflection because we're afraid of what we might find.
Yes.
And particular when it comes to money, because money again is such a touch point emotionally. So most people can point to a period when money stopped feeling like a background issue and became very much into their forefront. Whereas the time, what was the time in your life when financial uncertainty changed the way you saw yourself?
I have memories of being 4 years old, and there was a radio jingle that was, in the old days when they assigned words to phone numbers.
Mm.
So there was a loan company called Dial Finance, DIAL, and their radio jingle was "Dial, dial for a loan." And I asked my mom, "Why don't we just dial, dial for a loan, mommy? If we need money so badly, why don't we just do that?" And bless her sweet heart, she went into way too much detail of, how loans work and have to get repaid, and, "Mommy can't pay the bills as it is, so I can't borrow money
Mm.
and then have another bill to pay," and all of that to a 4-year-old. But nonetheless, I remember that conversation vividly. So, I know that at that age, I was well aware of the importance of money. Mom's answer for everything was, "We can't afford it." And
Hmm.
we really couldn't.
Right.
But she was trying to help us understand that it wasn't that she didn't want to do things for us and she didn't want us to not have what we wanted. She couldn't. And so felt like giving us all of the information,
Yeah.
like the way a loan works, but she was trying to help us see that she was doing the best she could. And she did. It took me a long time and a lot of therapy to get to the place where I could understand that she did the best she could with what she had. And I had spent decades trying to overcome all those issues, sort through my own issues and
Hmm.
what was hers and what was mine and all of that. And when I finally realized she just did the best she could, I was able to just really let it all go. And that helped me get to the place where I could see myself as living a life of abundance rather than scarcity.
Hmm. Which is an integral mindset. We'll touch on that in just a minute, but it just, given my professional background, when you talked about being a 4-year-old and saying, "Mommy, why don't we just call dial dial for a loan?" You also, whether you know it or not, had great experience in the power of marketing.
Isn't that the truth?
And how that works. Sometimes good, sometimes not so much. And this may be a question that it's you can answer this about yourself. You can answer this about your mom. You can answer this in general. But in your experience, Terry, when money feels unstable, what does it threaten most? Is it comfort? Is it identity? Is it security? Is it control?
I think all of the above, and certainly for different individuals, it's stronger. One or the other of those might be stronger. For me, it was absolute bare security. I felt like once I was older and learned about Maslow's hierarchy, I felt like I was stuck on the bottom rung of survival. And the idea of getting, working my way up the ladder just seemed hopeless because it was so deeply entrenched.
And I have to agree with you that all four of those feelings, emotional situations, it, all of them are valid. And it does depend on who we are and the severity, if you will, of either the reality or the perception of our unstable financial situation. As you grew into a young adult, you said your family was very industrious, in particular, the women were very industrious. Share with us, Terry, a little bit about where you went, I'll say professionally, where you went to earn money.
Well, I was earning money at 15 when I was too young to be able to be paid with a paycheck because you were supposed to be 16 and to turn in all those employee reports. But I had a job. Well, my very first earning money, I was probably in third grade. And my best friend and I decided we lived in Oklahoma where they have chain link fences between the
Right.
different yards.
Yeah.
And of course, grass grows up that chain link fence. And so she and I actually made up little business cards for K&T Cutting and Trimming because her name was Kathy. And so it was Kathy and Terry Cutting and Trimming. And we went throughout the neighborhood asking neighbors if we could cut their grass by hand, lots of
Mm.
blisters. But that was my first experience earning money.
Well, that's interesting because now fast forward to 15 and then 16 in your late teens. What was your situation there?
Well, at 15, as I say, I started working in a women's boutique clothing store. And I worked there all the way into when I left for college. When I would come back for Christmas break, the owner said, "Please, can you come help me just over the holidays?" And so that was a long-term job, actually.
Mm.
And I went to school at 7. We had a program at the high school where we could have what they called 0 hour. And if we went to school at 7, we could get out at 2, and
Hmm.
it was mostly for those of us who were going to work. And I would leave school at 2 and be at my job by 2:30 and work until 7 on school days and then all day Saturday.
At the
And I
boutique.
did that all the way through high school.
That makes studying to stay in school that much more of a challenge. So it gave you virtually a full day.
It did. And grades were very, very important. I consider myself a high achiever. And I was doing homework till 2 in the morning, many, 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 many nights.
Boy, okay. So over time, from K&T cutting and trimming, as a marketing guy, did you call it cutting with a K?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah. So you're the people that started this whole change the spelling thing that we see. That's great. I mean, the creativity and genius of young minds is just incredible. So from K&T to working in the boutique and then beyond, what I want to touch on is how, in particular, did that period change how you viewed success? How did your definition of success change, if at all, just over time?
Well, of course, there were a lot more things. My husband and I owned a business for 10 years together. And our goal, or his goal, was to be a millionaire by the age of 30, back when $1 million amounted to something. And he missed it by 6 months. But we were both very actively involved in our business. In fact, we eventually were able to grow and build our own offices. And our daughter had what we called her office
Okay.
that had a bed. So we lived at the company. I had a sofa that made into a bed also. so that I could spend nights at the office if I needed to. So really consumed with our business. And then we lost everything. We lost our home, we lost our lifestyle, our retirement, everything, because we were in Oklahoma and the wheat crop failed and the oil industry busted, as it so
Mhm.
often does. We were banking with a New York bank that made a decision to get out of any clients they had in Oklahoma. And
Mhm.
within 90 days, they shut down 3 companies, which included ours, and another one that was a 100-year-old family business,
Mm.
and then another one that had been founded in the 1930s. And within 90 days, they just shut us all down. So it was drastic.
Yeah, very much so. Are you comfortable sharing what the business was that you and your husband were in?
Yes, it's interesting. We were talking about K&T Cutting and Trimming because our business was called, it was our initials, which was KVTV Wholesale Carpet. So it sounded like the call letters for a television station
It
because my
does.
initials are TV, but I never made the connection about these initials, this conversation. But we it was wholesale carpet.
Okay. Be and a lot of listeners wanted to know that because you said that, he missed his millionaire status by 6 months at the age of 30. A lot of people are going, "Tell me how he did that." Well, I think the biggest thing is opportunity and hard work, and the right
Absolutely.
situation, and obviously the big thing, to add to that is the situation can change,
Yes.
and oftentimes it'll change without any of our own input. So sometimes that happens where the economy itself goes in such a way that the business won't continue. And we then have the opportunity to adjust or to be a victim, one way or the other,
Yes.
or sometimes both. Sometimes it's okay to be a victim for a while, I think, because we have to go through it. But beyond that, uh, what about the moments in life where people realize the path they're on is no longer the right one, not because of of the economy or an oil bust, but just when they think this isn't for me?
Well, I think I can speak to that because after we lost the business, I literally was cleaning houses to make money. And he was trying to get another business started and was, early days of a startup. You know how that goes. So at one point, I don't really know what triggered, but I walked in, my husband was in the kitchen and I said, "I just called Harvard for an application."
Hmm.
And he looked at me with his jaw open. We'd not talked about anything like this. And I'd gone to 1 year of college out of high school, so I didn't have my undergrad.
Hmm.
And but this was before the days of internet. So that's why I'd called our local library to get a phone number for Harvard. And when he looked at me, he said, "That's a great idea. Why don't you call Stanford too?"
Okay.
And so I did. And I got the applications. And by the time the applications came, I thought this was a silly idea. I actually called Northwestern as well. They misspelled my name on the envelope. I found their envelope in a drawer that I never opened, not because they misspelled my name, but nonetheless, I had not opened their envelope. And so Stanford's the only one I applied to, and I got in. And we picked up and moved our family across country for mom to go to school, and that really changed our life.
Oh, no doubt. And there's so many things I take from that. Uh, First of all, if we have a wild idea, it's not always a bad thing to throw it out there, right? I mean, that's exactly what you did. That I have 1 year of university, but I'm gonna call Harvard, which is considered pretty prestigious. Then and then the other take is to have a spouse, a husband that when you said he looked at you, I thought you were gonna say like you were crazy. But when he said to you, "What a great idea, apply to Stanford also." that also says a whole lot about the relationship and about your then husband, assuming then husband. I
Now
don't know.
husband,
Now,
52 years.
oh, okay. Well, that helps explain why you have 52 years of marriage, to be honest. What a tremendous response from him. So tell me about moving forward from Oklahoma to California to go to Stanford with 1 year of university under your belt.
Well, of course, I went as an undergrad, so the fact that I had 1 year made me a transfer student for the undergrad program. And then I did stay and do my master's as well. But we had moved from a 6,000 square foot house with a pool and cabana to an 800 square foot campus apartment that was so small that the rug that had been in our entry hall was so much bigger than our bedroom that we ran it across the floor and up the wall and tacked it above the headboard to be, or as if it were a headboard. I feel like that run situation was such a glaring example of the change in our life.
But it is, yeah, no doubt, and in particular, if you had fellow students come into your flat and wonder why the heck a rug's going up there, but it's also an ongoing reminder of adapting.
Yes.
Uh, Things have changed. Let's make the most of it. And that is kind of a cool thing. It's kind of a cool story. So, in your case, at that point, you felt that reinvention was necessary.
Survival.
Okay. And so, what's the difference, do you think, from reinventing yourself out of necessity versus just because you're uncomfortable at that time? Does that make sense to you? I mean,
Well, it does, but I honestly don't know that I can speak to it because survival has always been the basis
okay.
of, of my identity growing up, my mom's life and how we got through and made it. So that's just with I don't have anything else to compare it to be able to answer your question.
That makes sense to me, given the scenario that you just painted for us. But I think we can probably have a little bit of takeaway based on your experience and all of the looking back that you've done. Had you been at that point just a little uncomfortable, like, well, cleaning houses isn't really great, but we're getting by, and you may have thought, I don't want to put ideas in your head, but my idea suggests that you may have been thinking, yeah, this isn't really what I wanted it to be, but then you think back about your mom and you might think it's uncomfortable, but you felt the absolute necessity to change drastically.
I will say this, my husband was raised with a lot more affluence than I was. And I honestly was able to weather the storm, I think more easily than he did because I knew what it was like to literally add water to the beans. And he had not ever grown up with that. And so, shortly after the business failed, my daughter and I were shopping at consignment stores,
Mm.
and he was still shopping at high-end boutiques, because that's all he'd ever known.
Yeah.
And he did I'll never forget, he had a pair of shoes that he bought at a consignment store that he had resold so many times. So he did get there eventually.
Yeah,
But I do
sometimes
think it was harder, much harder for him than it was for me.
that's also interesting, how much again, our background and how much he was influenced in his upbringing with money because they had some.
Yes.
And he was used to, I'm gonna call it maybe not privilege, but accessibility more
Yes.
more so
Yes.
than perhaps you with your mom. So when you do something like that, when people do something like that, and I say you because I love hearing it from your perspective, but you feel free to generalize again because this has been your life's work. Was that period and periods similar to that for most folks? Is that more about rebuilding financially or is it about rebuilding personally?
I think it's more personal. The finances come along with it
Mhm.
as you rebuild personally.
Okay. And that goes to speak, I think, to how much we identify who we are with how much we have.
Yes.
And we'll talk in a little bit about hopefully getting beyond that a bit and focusing more on who we are and then being comfortable with what we have, maybe. But let's talk about moving on and financial security. And I touched on this during the intro. A lot of people assume that if they reach a certain number, that anxiety disappears. But that normally doesn't happen because when we're chasing money, if we get to whatever the level is, be it $1,000 or a millionaire by age 30 and a half, we then think, well, there's got to be more than that.
I think
Is
that's
that
part
true?
of it, and I think the other part of it is we think that when we get to that place, whatever that goal might have been, that then we're going to feel secure,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to feel like, "Okay, I can relax." But that's what typically doesn't happen because we just keep raising our bar, as you're
Mm-hmm.
suggesting. And I think the reason we keep raising the bar is because we're chasing a feeling and an
Right.
experience that doesn't come. So we need to keep chasing it. I tell the story in my book of a dear friend who this was when we were much younger, and she said, if I had $100,000 in the bank, I would feel secure. And she had a very good job. She was a CFO and no children to pay for. And she got to that point pretty quickly, and she had a nice retirement account. And then she made a comment that if she just had more, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, that's what you said about 100,000, and you've got 100,000. And she said, well, but that's in my retirement account. That doesn't count. I said, look, you can make up whatever rules you want. It's your money and your life.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is you do have $100,000 sitting in a bank account. And you thought that would give you the sense that you'd be okay. And now you're telling me you need more to feel okay. So it's not just about the money.
I think that's 100% correct. I've got a friend of mine who recently retired, a very successful attorney, has talked about retiring for some time, and now it's almost like he's afraid to spend anything. He's hesitant to do what he said he always wanted to do, travel.
Yes.
And he has all these concerns. So, um, is that a situation where someone's financially secure, but they just feel unsafe?
Yes.
And
That
what
is
do you
exactly
think
what it
drives
is.
that in your experience?
I think it could be anything from what they heard growing up as a kid of what it would mean to be safe. Or it could be a sense of insecurity that comes from growing up with a childhood where they didn't have enough. And the way that was dealt with in their family. Kids learn about money.
Mhm.
Some parents, most people, if you ask them, what did you learn about money growing up at home? So many people will say, well, nothing. My parents didn't teach me anything.
Mhm.
Wrong. Your parents taught you a whole lot, and then they maybe weren't using terms of money, but you were either watching them argue about who spent what, uh, or
Mhm.
not having money to buy something somebody wants, or you might have grown up hearing them talk about a relative who didn't have two nickels to rub together, and it was obvious that this relative was not highly thought of in the family. There are so many ways that parents give signals, and even if it's just a sense of an undercurrent,
Mhm.
kids are so incredibly intuitive and they pick up. And
Yeah.
so we've got all these stories that we inherited that we don't even realize we got unless we've taken the time to reflect on it and realize where it comes from.
Yeah.
And maybe to
Yeah.
realize that what we heard as a child may we process it through a child's brain. And we probably had no opportunity to test our assumptions or
Mhm.
what we thought we heard. And then therefore it gets stuck as a memory as if that's the way it was, when it may or may not have been the way we processed it as a younger child. And so we just build on all of this. And then we get to be an adult, and whether we have money or we don't have money, or we have
Mhm.
ambition or we don't have ambition, or we have retirement or we don't, all those different things it looks like we're dealing with those things when what we're really dealing with is those underlying experiences and memories and feelings and emotions.
And that's more along the lines of what I was getting at earlier when I asked you about, do we inherit our thoughts about money? And in that context, I had asked the question in that context. Another friend of mine always talks about, he judges people because, as he says, I watch their video. And even as kids, that's all we can do is watch the video of our parents. And
Exactly.
even if it's not discussion, in my experience, from speaking with others, it might be, "Where's mommy? Where's daddy?" Well, they can't be at your game because they're at work. Well, why are they at work? Well, because they need to make money. Oh,
Exactly.
so and that also has an impact. When people keep moving the goalpost of enough, what do you think they're really chasing? And you might have just touched on that. I might be just asking the question that you just gave me the answer to.
Yeah, I think it is a deeply embedded insecurity that there's something that they think is going to feel different. They don't know how because they haven't been there yet, but they think there will be some magic moment. I have a bit of a memory that might speak to this. When we had a lot of money, I was having some guests for dinner, and I had some baccarat crystal, which is very expensive per
Mhm.
stem, and I wanted to have a different style of glass for our dinner. And I literally went to the store and bought 4 baccarat glasses that were to the tune of, I don't know, close to $1,000. And I remember so vividly standing at the register when I was paying, thinking, "I don't feel anything." I had just spent $1,000 on 4 pieces of crystal, which, by the way, absolutely love to this day. I carried them to Hawaii with me. I love them as much today as I did back then, and I went to the Baccarat Crystal Factory in Paris. But the point is, standing there, I thought, "Why do I not feel something?"
Mm.
Having the ability to buy these beautiful pieces of crystal. And it was just such a watershed moment that I realized that I felt
That says something right there, doesn't it?
yes.
Well, I hope the dinner party was a
Well,
success.
and I am grateful that to this day, I have that crystal, and it truly does have significance to me. But the issue and I'm grateful that I bought it when I did, when I could. So it is something that gives me tremendous joy, but in the moment, it was just, the feeling that I should be feeling something different was really, telling.
That's a really interesting thought there, Terry. What does looking at those glasses evoke in you?
It's art. It's beautiful. Each glass in is made from one piece each stem is made from one piece of glass. The artistry that went into it, I do love art, and it's a thing of beauty,
Does
and
it
it
that
feels so good in my hand.
huh, and all of that is terrific, and all of that is the material, satisfaction of something that's very high end and skillfully made. What I'm wondering, though, is when you look at those, does that directly or indirectly or deep down, bring any type of feeling about how you are now and your financial security now versus then? And yeah, you said you bought those and you didn't feel anything about how fortunate you were to be able to buy
Yes.
them or whatever the
Yes,
case is.
exactly.
Is that any kind of a symbol now for how you maybe have grown since then?
I never thought about it that way, but it's possible that it does. As I say, I enjoy them because of what they are. So the
Hmm.
material
Okay.
thing that I is what I
Yeah.
enjoy. But I'd not given that really any thought that it is one of the few things that we managed to hold on to
Okay.
when we were losing everything. So it's possible that there is an underlying feeling there.
Well, when the book tour is over and you get back home to Hawaii, have a nice glass of wine in your nice baccarat glass and think about that and get back to us, will you?
I certainly
Uh,
shall.
you said something earlier, Terry, that I think is very important, and that was that no one really, our parents didn't talk to us about money. They didn't teach us anything about money. What they taught us was we don't have enough. And I think that leads to why we keep moving the goalpost as adults. But why is the conversation on money so difficult in general, between couple,
Mhm.
at any level? Why is that such a difficult conversation?
Well, certainly, I grew up being told we don't talk about money.
Mm,
And I imagine there were a lot of us that grew up hearing that
mhm,
very same message. And we assume that however we grew up, however money was used, and the feelings and the thoughts we grew up with are the same as everybody else, because we never get a chance to test that and find
mhm,
out, is this what you grew up in? And I think that then we get in a partnership with another human being who has the same assumptions. And lo and behold, it's very possible that they did not grow up with parents who had the same ideas about money. I had a wonderful opportunity to see this in action. I had actually given my time as a wedding gift to a young couple to talk to them about money. And we were having a conversation. They were both in grad school and had gone together about 3 years before they got married, and they'd been married a few months when we talked, and they didn't the wife kept spending money like she had it, like she had more money than she had. It came up in the course of the conversation,
mhm.
and I said, "Well, so let's stop a second. So, how did you get money as a kid when you needed money to buy something? How did you get it?" She said, "Well, I put it on my dad's credit card and he paid it." And her new husband looked at her incredulously and said, "Are you kidding?" And she said, "Well, no, how did you get money?" They'd never talked about it. And he said, "I got an allowance and I did chores for that allowance.
Yeah.
And if I needed more money to buy something that my allowance wouldn't cover, my parents might help me find some other chores to do, or I'd go to the neighbors and mow the lawn. But I worked for my money." And they'd been arguing over these credit card bills that kept coming in, and they, of course, couldn't pay them, and then they had interest charge, and he was
Mhm.
just pulling his hair out,
Yeah.
and she was still out spending money, and they'd never talked about it, and it's not surprising that within a couple of years, they were divorced, and I
Well, I
can't help
guess
but think that that whole financial piece was likely part of that.
probably a big part of it, but it also indicates more. It's a shame she couldn't still have daddy's credit card. That would have maybe saved the marriage. But
For a
when,
while.
yeah, exactly. When, in your experience, Terry, when couples argue about money, what are they really arguing about?
They are arguing about the underlying thoughts, memories. Another wonderful story a guy shared with me at a public talk I was giving, where he and his girlfriend had just bought a new house and had a whole house to furnish, and they went to the furniture store specifically to buy a sofa, and they ended up with such an argument that they left without buying anything because they thought they were arguing over the style and the colors and all of that. And once they got home and calmed down and talked about it, they realized that he'd grown up in a household where his parents still had the same furniture the hand-me-down furniture they'd gotten
Mhm.
when they got married and a few new pieces. But whatever they had, they kept forever. And she was looking at it like, "We have a whole house to furnish. We need to buy the least expensive
Mm,
we can," whereas he was thinking you buy the most expensive because it has to last.
right.
And she was thinking we need a whole lot of pieces, so we need to make our money spread further. And that's what they were arguing about, was just an underlying difference of understanding of what were we doing here buying furniture. But of course, they hadn't had that conversation until the argument brought it forth. And to
Mm,
their credit, they did have the conversation. So many people don't. They just
right.
have the argument and it goes away, and then they have the same argument. They could almost argue by number. They'll paint by number.
Yeah.
Well, the folks have the same argument over and over, and they could just say 42, and they both know what that argument is.
Kind of the thread that I'm starting to hear, driven by money, perhaps more than any other topic, but the thread is that money starts to bring to light a lack of basic communication and understanding between a couple, regardless of the money.
Exactly.
It's and what you just described with that couple is, I grew up thinking buy the best you can and have it last forever, and the wife grew up thinking furnish the whole house, and
Exactly.
and we can't do both. So we can have one room with really nice stuff and then build as we go, or we can have a bunch of, with all due respect, I love them, IKEA throughout the house.
Exactly.
Or which yeah, times in my life I would have been happy to upgrade to IKEA. So what is it that a lot of people smart, successful in business, all these great traits, avoid opening bills, avoid addressing things, financial.
I think it goes right back to what we were talking about, to those underlying messages. Certainly, the issue with opening mail is one I see so many times, and often an issue for folks who have ADHD. And at least in my experience and looking at the preponderance of that, I think that, and I'm talking people who actually have money to pay those bills. It's
Mhm.
one thing to
Yeah,
avoid
yeah.
opening the envelopes because you don't have the money to pay them anyway, but it's a completely different thing, where I think there's a knowledge that when I open that bill, there's something else that I'm going to have to do,
Mhm.
and it's one more thing that I may not be able to get done, and so there's an expectation of that opening the mail comes with an additional step or 2 in the process. So I think
Mhm.
that's one part of it. The other, the avoidance is for so many folks, thinking about money brings on a visceral reaction.
Mhm.
I have had clients tell me they don't open the mail. They want reports on how much they spend and all. Then they want them in snail mail, but then they won't open the envelopes. Because even though it's already spent, it's money they had, they know that it's okay that they spent that money. It physically pains them. I've had clients talk about a stomach ache, headache, different physical
Mhm.
ailments that thinking about money brings.
Anyone listening that has that tendency, and again, let's be clear, you and I both, and I think we've both at some point in our lives, I'd be hard pressed to say that we haven't been in the situation of don't answer the phone, don't open the door because it's a bill collector. So we're not
Yeah.
necessarily talking about that financial
No,
situation
that's
per
right.
se, but like you said, people that have a decent job that know they spend money, but it's just some type of visceral reaction. Do you have any advice for anyone listening on what they might do to overcome that?
Buy my book.
I love it. I love it. So, yeah. Um,
Yeah, you weren't expecting that. Uh,
no, I
but the
wasn't, but it was
point
brilliant.
is, the book is it's it's written from a viewpoint of extreme compassion
Mm,
and understanding, and it encourages people to think about how did they get to this place where this is the effect money has on you. But at the end of each chapter, there's a section called Something to Think About, and it gives them questions to help drive their own internal conversation, to help them come to the place where they can understand how they got to where they think about it now. And then there's the chapter on kids and money, a chapter on partners and money. And those chapters also have how to have a conversation with your partner about
mm.
money, how to have a conversation, how to find out what your kids think about money. And so it was a bit of a glib answer, but it really wasn't, because I do think that is the whole reason I wrote the book, is to help those folks for whom money is so painful that they really do want
Mhm.
to have a better relationship and feel like they are financially well.
So perhaps a glib answer, I would say a brilliant answer. And frankly, Terry, to be honest, one of the primary reasons we've asked you to be a guest on our show is because of your experience and because of the knowledge that you've now put into the book, the emotional side of money. And we've been talking for 45 minutes now about the emotional impact of money. We haven't been talking about how to invest wisely.
No.
So yeah, I think people checking out the emotional side of money, the book, It'll be in the show notes, or you can just Google The Emotional Side of Money and go to wherever you buy books.
It's also available on audio, which I recorded myself.
Okay, there you
So,
go.
for folks who don't want to read a book, it's available on audio.
Yeah, it is interesting when we talked about not opening bills, the physical correspondence stays there.
Yes.
Yeah. If we get something digitally, it's a lot easier to put it in a folder or just to scroll down. So that's a whole nother thing we won't get into today. But let's talk a little bit more about the concept of the difference between having enough and believing we have enough.
If we have enough, but we don't believe we do, kind of what's the benefit of having enough?
Ah, okay.
How we feel about it is so incredibly important because if we feel like, well, the concept of scarcity and abundance, I didn't have names. I lived scarcity, but I
Hmm.
didn't have a name for it. And many years ago, I read Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective Living, I think it was titled. And in that, he described, at least my recollection of it, was that he described scarcity as there's one pie. And if you take pie, a piece of pie, that's that much less pie for me. So I may not get my needs met if you take too much pie. Abundance is we have a pie, and if we run out of pie, we simply make more.
Hmm.
And when I read that, it truly was a watershed event in my life because, first of all, it gave me a name for what I lived. But the second piece was I could not, in my wildest imagination, dream of ever feeling like I could look at life from a place of abundance. And I now do. And that transformation, and I think that may be part of why I wrote the book, because I want other people to know that it is possible.
So having enough and believing we have enough, from what I'm hearing you saying and my belief, presents us with what I'll call financial freedom. What do most people misunderstand about financial freedom in that context?
It's not about how much you have. And I'm talking beyond obvious the difficulty of putting food on the table. That's not
Hmm.
what I'm talking about. I
Right.
understand that that's another realm. But for folks who really do have enough, but there's that fear that they won't have. And they maybe do today, but will I have tomorrow? Your friend you described. And it's that confidence in yourself that if we run out of pie, we'll make more. And that whatever comes, I will deal with it. And I'll make pie in whatever way I need to make pie
Mhm.
to be able to have the life I want to live.
That's a great answer. I also want to offer up to folks to give some thought to using this podcast. What's the point? You want more money. What's the point? What's that do for you?
Great
And I
question.
think we fall into a trap that we can never win, frankly, if we're defining who we are by how much money we have. And a lot of people do that, and it's very prevalent in today's society.
Yes.
Everyone, I mean, across the board, people define themselves by, they're a millionaire, they're a billionaire, they're a cajillionaire, and look what they've done, and look at all the places they go. And that finding out that that's not something I can define myself effectively about gave me some freedom. And I'm sorry, I was going on and you had something to say?
No, I agree completely. I think it's a great point. And exactly what is the point of having more money if you're not going to have the sense of freedom to be able to do the things you want to do and to have the life you want to live? I mean, isn't that kind of the whole purpose of
Yeah, and to be the person that we are,
and to
with
be
or without.
satisfied, not only satisfied, but to rejoice in that
Right.
person we are.
Yeah.
My hashtag I use all the time on social media is I love my life. And
Yeah.
that's because I absolutely I relish in the life I live. And people say, "Oh, you're so lucky." I am lucky. I absolutely am lucky. There's no doubt about it. But I also think we make our own luck to a large extent.
I've heard it put that gratitude comes when what we have is enough.
Oh, I love that. Yes,
And
absolutely.
it doesn't mean getting more is a bad thing.
No, it does not.
Okay, to
Absolutely
appreciate where
does
we are,
not.
right? So
That's right.
thank you so much for coming on and for in the middle of your book tour for The Emotional Side of Money, available wherever you buy books, and check the show note. But money seems to be less about numbers and more about trust, trust in ourselves, trust in relationships, trust that we'll be okay, comfort. Uh, and you've talked a lot about that, and we just touched on this a little bit, but I had to be consistent. At the end of every episode, you're going to get the same question everyone does, Tari Vickery, and at the end of our conversation, what's the point?
The point is to have the life you want to live. You can have that based on who you are as a person, what you value, the relationships you have, the love that you pass along. That's the point.
That's brilliant. I love that. So thank you so much for your honesty and perspective and being open about your journey from not having money to having the amount of money that you're comfortable living with right now, whatever that amount is. And so those of you listening, if this episode leaves you thinking differently about the stories you carry around about money, or whether some of them were ever really yours to begin with, or something you quote unquote inherited from your parents, give that some thought. And if you have questions and you want some clarification, again, check out Terry's book, The Emotional Side of Money. Terry Vickery, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for listening to What's the Point? If this conversation meant something to you, we hope you'll follow the show and share it with someone who might benefit from it. And if you know a guest with a story worth exploring, send me a message, bill@billellis.com. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on the show, and I'll see you next time.